Hello. Today we are going to study grammar. Our new lesson talks about modals, advice, obligation, and prohibition. Let's start with the advice. If you want to give advice to someone, we can use should or ought to. The word should or ought to make recommendations and give advice. Like, you ought to go to the dentist. You ought to go to the dentist. Or, he shouldn't smoke so much. He shouldn't smoke so much. This is for the advice. Also, the obligation here we can use must and have to talk about obligation in the present. We normally use must when it's a personal obligation. But we usually use have to when we are talking about rules we are obliged to follow. Like, I must get fit if I want to play in the basketball team. So here, the obligation is personal. So, the speech here from me that I say I must get fit if I want to play in the basketball team. But number 2, we have to finish the project by Thursday. We have to finish the project by Thursday. So, it's a rule. We are obliged to do or to do this task. All the cast have to finish the project by Thursday. Not only me, but also all the members of the team, they are asked to do this task. Okay? This is in the present. We use had to talk about obligation in the past. Obligation for a personal and also for rules. So had to is the past for to give the obligation. For must and have to. And had to speak to the boss about the accident. And had to speak to the boss about the accident. We can say we had to finish the project last Thursday. It was the deadline. Okay? Also, we can use the word need to. Need to, we use it to talk about necessity. Like, you need to revise irregular verbs for the exam. You need to revise irregular verbs for the exam. We use don't have to and the word needn't. The word needn't to say there isn't any obligation to do something. You can choose to do something or not to do it. So it's optional. That means that it's not an obligation. It's optional for you to do it or to leave it. We use needn't, but without the preposition to. Okay? We don't have to do any homework tonight. So let's play tennis. He needn't work. He needn't work. I didn't say he needn't to work. No, he needn't work for his parents, but he likes to help them. He needn't work for his parents, but he likes to help them. Is it okay? Okay. The last thing here, prohibition, as we have just said, something that you mustn't do, something not allowed, something which is not allowed. We use mustn't to say that something is not allowed. Like, students mustn't eat and drink in the classrooms. Students mustn't eat and drink in the classrooms. So, today we have talked about the advice using the word should or shouldn't and ought to and ought not to for the advice. As we have just said, you ought to go to the dentist or he shouldn't smoke so much. Number two, we talked about the obligation. And we said that we use must and have to talk about obligation in the present. We normally use must for personal obligation, but we use have to if we are talking about the rules we are obliged to follow. I must get fit if I want to play in the basketball team, or we have to finish the project by Thursday. I've just said that we all have to finish the project, not only me. We use had to talk about obligation in the past. Like Anne had to speak to the boss about the accident. Also, you know that we use need to talk about necessity. You need to revise irregular verbs for the exam. You need to revise irregular verbs for the exam. And we have said we use don't have to or doesn't have to or needn't without to say there isn't any obligation to do something. You can choose to do something or not to do it. I have just said it's optional for you to do it or to leave it. But notice that we use needn't without the preposition to. Like we said, we don't have to do any homework tonight, so let's play tennis. He needn't work for his parents, but he likes to help them. And the last thing here was the prohibition. Prohibition, we use mustn't to say something is not allowed. Students mustn't eat or drink in the classroom. Students mustn't eat or drink in the classrooms. So, let's check some exercise here. We haven't got any homework this weekend, so we don't have to, mustn't, can't, should study. Yes, we don't have to study. Number 2, they are holding a map so they can, might, will, have, be tourists. Yes, might be tourists, because we aren't sure about if they are tourists or not, but I can guess. So we use the word might. Number 3, you ought, you should, you mustn't, you can't appreciate the opportunity that you have been given. So, you should, I advise you that you should appreciate the opportunity that you have been given. Number 4, you mustn't, you needn't, you don't have to, you should speak while the other students are doing the exam. So you mustn't. I talk to you, so I warn you not to talk or not to speak. So you mustn't speak while the other students are doing the exam. Number 5, you ought to, or you should, or you have to, or you shouldn't get a passport if you want to travel abroad. If you want to travel abroad, so you have to, because it's a rule. No one can move from a country to another without having a passport. So it's a rule we all have to follow. So you have to get a passport if you want to travel abroad. And also we have here number 6. I want to go to the university. So I have to, or I must, or I mustn't, or I don't have to study hard. I talk about myself, so I have to here, because if I or you and anyone wants to go to the university, so all of us have to study hard. All of us have to study hard. Okay? I think here we have some rewrite sentences. Number 1, I have to bring back the books on Monday. I have to bring back the books on Monday. If I asked you to use not, if I asked you to use not, so I don't have to bring back the books on Monday. We made the negative here, have to, and it's I don't have to. Number 2, they have to call him before the meeting. Use what? I want you to make a question here. So what do they have to do before the meeting? What do they have to do before the meeting? Okay. Number 3, she must forget all the matter. She must forget all the matter. So she mustn't forget all the matter. Number 4, you mustn't forget your mistakes. Use what? So, what mustn't I do? What mustn't I do? Number 5, it's a very important sentence here. It's necessary to wear a uniform at school. Use have to. So, you or we have to wear a uniform at school. It's a rule here. So, we have to use the word have to. You have to wear a uniform at school. Number 6, it's prohibited to smoke inside the hospital. Use mustn't, so you mustn't smoke inside the hospital. You mustn't smoke inside the hospital. Okay? Now, let's check exercise or lesson number 4 in the same unit, motivation. Here we have some new vocab, but they are interesting. Why? Because we will have some pictures for these new words. Number 1, the word banner. Banner. Yes, this is the banner. This is the banner, something like the board, but we can have some advertisements written on it. So it's a banner. A banner. Okay? Number 2, speaker. Speaker. This is the speakers. I think all of us know it. Speaker, something that we can get sounds coming out of it. So they are the speakers. Okay? Number 3, flip chart. This is the flip chart. It's a board that have more paper here, and we can change these papers while discussing some matter. Okay? It's the flip chart. Flip chart. We also have the word microphone. Microphone. Here this is the microphone. You see it? It's the microphone. Okay? Okay. We also have the word lecture. Lecture.